which is her most recent adventure. And of course, she's really good at that. She was also a two-time Emmy-winning TV investigative reporter for 18 years. She's overcome many challenges over the decades. And at the age of 28, she almost died from a colon blockage. She saved herself by going on a vegan diet. She was voted the 2014 sexiest vegan over 50 by PETA and deemed the vegan rock star by the Vegan Street blog, one of my favorite places, the Vegan Street blog. Ellen often gets pegged for 20 years younger than she is. And I encourage everyone to check out her books, her website, www.vegcoach.com. And I will also put that in the chat, and we'll mention these again. And one of the books, I've gotten a couple of her books. The first one I got was Eat Vegan on $4 a day. And I love that because so many people think eating vegan is so expensive, and it doesn't have to be. So my first question is, how long have you been vegan, and why did you choose to go vegan? And then you could just let us know whatever else you want to talk about. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy, for having us here. And I just want to say, so Troy, as you mentioned, is my partner, and we work really hard during the day, and Friday is our date night. So I hope you don't mind, I kind of drafted him in being here, but legitimately, he is also vegan and has been a runner for a very long time. And so we'll both talk about that. And if it's okay with you, we'll both answer the same questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. I'm thrilled.
Yeah. So at the age of 28, as you mentioned, I had this epiphany like many of us do. My mom, aunt, and both sisters had breast cancer. And that particular year was the second time my one sister had gotten breast cancer. So the handwriting was on the wall, and I had doctors after the colon blockage saying, you better do something differently or you're going to end up like everybody else in your family. Wow. And doctors in the emergency room said they'd never seen a colon blockage so large in somebody so young, and I would need to be on medication the rest of my life. So I ran to the health food store and read all 5 books on fiber, because that's all there was at the time. And I just, started changing at that point. So I was vegan before I was even married. We didn't really use the word then, but I befriended a woman who was also a runner and worked at a health food store. And she was the one who really got me on board. And, I would go to her house for meals. And back in those days, we actually were eating more macrobiotically, which is a more rigid way of eating vegan, except that particular diet at the time included whitefish. Which I would later.
I already have a question for you. When you found out that you probably needed to go vegan, how did you feel about that? What were your thoughts at that time?
Well, I knew I needed to change some things. Right. The doctors would later tell me that I had such chronic constipation that I, to this day, have an extra foot of colon. And I would get so bloated as a kid that when I was in grade school, my friends would make fun of me saying, "Oh, you're looking pregnant today, Ellen." And we would have these called the moo dresses. And, I legitimately at the age of 8 or 9 looked pregnant. I mean, it was just, I look back on that and go like, how, and doctors would come to the house back in those days, pediatricians would do house calls. And, my mother was worried I had appendicitis. And the doctors would just say, "Oh no, it's gas," dismiss the whole thing.
But and we were desperate. You would try anything then.
Yeah, I mean, our family would eat. I grew up in St. Louis, and they had these amazing Italian restaurants there. And we would go out to this one in particular and have toasted ravioli, which was basically fried meat, and just disgusting stuff, and all this white flour, the spaghetti and everything, and it just affected me in a terrible way. So anyway, I started doing my homework and researching, and there's so much breast cancer in our family, we became part of the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genetic study. So if you go to the doctor today and get those gene studies, for breast cancer, as I often joke, our family's genes, my genes went to the Supreme Court because Myriad Genetics, which did the research, tried to actually get a patent on the breast cancer gene. and the Supreme Court turned that down. So
So we know now that a whole food plant-based diet that's well balanced turns on healthy aspects of genes and turns off the unhealthy ones because our genetics is not set in stone. It's fascinating. So, okay.
right. And they figure that 2 of the cases in our family were genetic, but the other 2 were later in life. So they believe those were environmentally triggered. So I thought that was, kind of interesting as we filtered all that out. But the trajectory was I went macrobiotic, then vegan, and then when I got married and had kids, OMG, the doctors and the nurses said you're going to cause brain damage to that unborn fetus if you don't drink dairy and have whey protein. I remember having whey protein in canisters when I was pregnant. And so, the irony of that is because of breast cancer, I would learn that breastfeeding is very protective against not only the mother, but also the female offspring. So I became very involved in La Leche League, which is Spanish for breastfeeding, because the founding mothers didn't want anybody to know what they were doing in the back rooms in the 1960s. And so that was really fun to become involved in that organization. And yet their cookbooks were all full, once the babies were weaned from our own species milk, with the recipes were all filled with meat and dairy from a cow.
Isn't that crazy that people think they need cow's milk? That just blows my mind. But go on.
So so I went back to being vegetarian and vegan for myself. I would serve the veggie burgers at my kids' private school because you couldn't do that in public school, of course. And we, but the family stayed vegetarian until I actually moved to Florida and was on my own and I had hemorrhaging fibroid tumors, and the doctors wanted to do a hysterectomy. And again, found myself in the emergency room hemorrhaging with these fibroids. And my regular OB, who turned out to be a closet vegan, said, why don't you go back to that vegan diet and call me in the morning? And sure enough, within just a few weeks, all signs of menopause were gone. Hot flash was gone. Fibroid shrank. Never needed to have a hysterectomy or the fibroids removed. So I have all my body parts.
From giving up dairy, animal dairy.
Absolutely. I mean, it was like
right. It's new cell growth formula. That's what it is. And it's, it's got all those reproductive hormones in it. So it makes sense that all those things would happen, but you really got it.
As we, many of the vegan doctors out there say, and dietitians, cow's milk, the insulin growth factor in cows makes a baby cow grow into a ginormous animal in a matter of months. And it also makes, coincidentally, baby tumors grow into large tumors very quickly. So estrogen receptive breast cancer, other forms of cancer where there's rapid tumor growth, often linked to dairy. And the same goes for prostate cancer. I would eventually teach cooking classes for Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicines. It was the Cancer Project when I did it, and then it evolved to become the Food for Life program now.
Right.
It was really the first national cooking program on a large scale basis. And I did that for 6 years before my first book came out. So that's kind of my journey, short nutshell. Everybody in my family of origin had long, miserable, suffering lives until they all died. And I just grew up. I have 3 daughters, and I just wanted a different reality for them. My parents were so sick and diseased by the time I had kids, they couldn't lift them, let alone babysit them. So that's my story.
Okay.
Troy has his own.
So let's hear from Troy.
Yeah, I found out my son had it's an issue called Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. It's a connective tissue disorder. And so I went to the conference to learn more about what that was and what could be done to treat it. It's not treatable, but they had a speaker there that talked about living the best life that he could with this situation. And he was a vegetarian. I know at the time it just seemed like that was a pretty radical situation to be a vegetarian to change your health. And I knew I couldn't do it at that point.
Right.
But later on, the way the world, now that we have meetups and communities and podcasts like yourself, I mean, we have more of a support system for things like that. So later on, I did become vegan, and I joined meetup groups and tried to plug in, and it was a lot easier to do that with the support. But initially,
Absolutely.
when I heard the idea, I didn't see that being real possible.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's really grown exponentially really in the last 5 or 6 years. I went vegan in July 2014, and it's a massive change since then I've seen. And so I can't imagine, and you guys have been vegan a lot longer than that. And I always think, wow, that's so amazing that they could do that. But I guess once you learn the facts, and once you have an objective perspective and see what's really going on, it actually becomes quite easy. It's just being surrounded by all of that stuff. But I've been into eating healthy for decades, so I'm used to fending off most of the stuff that society puts in our face. You know, they say in the grocery store, shop the perimeter, right? That's where the healthy food is. And or the I always think it's odd that stores have a health food section. Like, really? What what's that saying about the rest of the stuff that's there, you know? So yeah, so it's really a matter of and we all like to make our own choices, you know. Some people get a little defensive when you talk about going vegan. They say, don't tell me what to eat. But the problem is other people have been telling us what to eat, and they constantly do. You go into restaurants and you see, you know, the menus, and you're pretty much, that's, they're telling you, you know, that's what you should be eating. But it's very empowering to make these choices based on what we know and our own personal experiences. So what about your athletic career? Like, how do you tie in, you know, being vegan with your athletic career?
Well, I could barely, as a child, I remember barely being able to walk a mile, which I think we had to do for the President's Fitness Council or something like that,
Whoa.
in 20 minutes. I mean, I remember just really struggling. Of course, you know, St. Louis has a lot of humidity, and, you know, when we were outside for gym, it just wasn't usually a pleasant experience, air quality terrible, that kind of thing.
Um,
So I really was, I started doing some running before I had children, and racing a little bit. And I was always a middle of the packer. And then when I had kids, I kind of took about 6 years off, and then started racing again. I participated in the Snowball Series in St. Louis, which was a series of 5 races during January and February. It was horrible. You know, I remember it was so cold. We wore, back in those days, I guess they still have this, Gore-Tex. It was like putting on a suit of armor, and it was really heavy and really noisy. When you would run in it, it would make this terrible sound. But it kept you warm, and I managed to maintain that. And the cool thing about it is that my middle daughter and her son did that series a few years ago in St. Louis, and they got me a 40-year anniversary jacket from that race series, which was just,
wow.
but yeah, so that's how long I've been running. I did take time off from running when, you know, my kids were younger. And then when I moved back to Florida in 2004, one of the first days I was there, I heard a shotgun out my window, and I thought either somebody's dead or it's a race starting. And fortunately, we lived across from a park, and I saw that there was a large group of people. So I wandered over there and struck up a conversation with a woman who I am still friends with to this day. And I said, how do people run in Florida in the summertime? And she goes, just get up at sunrise. And so that's been very good advice that has served me well over the years. And the thing about Florida, I mean, people think of it as so hot in the summer. I'll take a Florida summer over a St. Louis summer any day of the year. It's usually 10 to 20 degrees cooler. There's always a sea breeze. So, you know, if you're perspiring, you know, the sweat is evaporating, and you just I don't feel that hot. So basically you can exercise here pretty much every day of the year. And, you know, a hurricane comes, you run away for a few days, and it's not a big deal. Unlike tornadoes and earthquakes, both of which I've experienced in St. Louis. So, you know, that's kind of my background there. What happened was in 2006, I was going to running clubs, and I encourage everybody to join your local running club. And, you know, if you want to be the resident outspoken loudmouth vegan, as I was, you know, knock yourself out. People, there's actually some chemical reaction that goes on when you're running that is like a truth serum. So if you're right, you know, there are these shirts out there, what happens on the long run stays on the long run. It's because we
Running, or can you walk fast?
I'm sorry.
You walk fast, or does it have to be running?
You know, I don't know really the answer to that. Other than, you know, people talk about the runner's high. It's the same
Right.
chemical endorphin gush in the brain. And anyway, I just found that in the local running community, people were starting to observe that I had a pretty good pace. And this one woman who was the coach at the local high school for the girls cross country team said, why don't you come out and run with us? So I started doing that. And she said, why don't you start racing? And so I decided to sign up for a race. And what I realized is that at my age, which then was just in the 50s, you know, not a whole lot of women were in my age group. And so it didn't take very long before I started placing. And what you see behind me is that I've placed 212 times in a 5K or longer race. So some of those are 10Ks, not a lot. And there's even a half marathon that I placed in.
What does placing mean?
Generally, it means placing in the top 3 of your 5-year age groups. The way races are done is that they keep track of your age. And well, before COVID, I mean, you would find sometimes 2 5K races on a single day or on a single weekend. And then at the end of the race, they would they now have these chip times. Let's see if I can get a bib that I happen to have here. Let me see. Okay, I thought I might have one handy here. Well, anyway, they give you a race bib, and it's got a magnetic stripe on the back of it. And when you cross the finish line, it registers how fast you're going. So, yeah, I keep looking for one right here. Okay. Anyway, so that's how they know how fast you've gone. And in the old days, actually, I mean, it really has evolved. They would give you a card when you crossed the finish line, and they would stand there with like a little button clicker at the end, and they would match the electronic printout on that clicker with the index card and the number on the index card. So that was old school. Sometimes it would take as long as 90 minutes to get race results. But now with the chip timing on the bib, they have just these electronic computers that will take it all in. And so, you know, by the end of the race, you know, almost as soon as you cross the finish line, actually, it'll come over your phone in a text to tell you what place you have.
Wow.
So it's really quite fun. And we have a whole group of running friends, you know, not really vegan, but you see all the races, and everybody's kind of checking in on each other and messaging each other during the times before the races. And you know, it's pretty competitive, although the older I get, it's just like, you know, you showed up. All right, that's awesome. Because, you know, people are, what I found, but this is really interesting, in my 50s, it was incredibly competitive. You know, I would almost, I would have trouble placing, especially the older you get in the 5-year age group. Like right now, I'm 68. So the way the age groups work, like in my age group now, it's 65 to 69. So I'm pretty much one of the oldest ones in my age group, and it's harder for me to place. When you're the youngest in your age group, it's a lot easier, relatively speaking, to place. But in my 50s, I started noticing that women who used to beat me like crazy and were faster and all that, they started getting arthritis. And some of them are not even running anymore. The reason is vegans typically don't get arthritis. A meat and dairy diet is very inflammatory, and the protein lodges in the joints. And as a result, people just can't, you know, they'll say things like, oh, it's my knees, or oh, it's my hip. And really, it's just that inflammation that is created by an animal-based diet.
Right. That's awesome. So you want to tell us about a few of those 200 and something? Are there a few that you particularly are proud of?
Oh, they all have stories, but let's see. First of all, I just moved things around a little bit. So let me see here. Some of them like to hide.
Your cat, how many cats do you have?
Just one.
Oh.
Just
Did
one.
your cat ever go after them?
Oh, no. No, what she does do though, the sliding glass door you see behind me, she thinks that's her competition or something. And so she'll jump at the reflections.
Oh, that's funny.
All right. So this one is from the National Senior Games. That's a bronze medal from 2017.
Wow.
I got third place in the 4x100s. And then I got a gold medal. And again, I just changed this around. So I apologize for, I probably need to put my glasses on. That might be helpful in finding these things. So
Are those races all in Sarasota where you live now, or are they in different places?
well, the National Senior Games, and this was in the first year I did it was in Cleveland.
When you're in a competition, do you have people ask you about being vegan or surprised that you're doing so well because you're vegan? Because it seems like one of the things you've been doing is busting those vegan myths for a long time. And we get a lot of the same questions. What about protein? What about this? What about that? What you need for your brain? And, there's all kinds of crazy concocting stories coming out now.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, you got to just tune out the noise and do what works for you.
Right.
And certainly it's more crazy now than it ever was. But
Yeah.
the short story on that is I started wearing, because I was speaking at VegFest before COVID completely ended my book and speaking tour. I developed, I took one of those yellow neon running tech shirts and put the image of my first book, Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, on the shirt. So it was about this big. So people would come up to me at races and kind of like look at my chest and go, yeah, right. Well, they would say things really obnoxiously like, oh, you can't run on a vegan diet. You certainly can't race on a vegan diet.
Exactly.
So that kind of planted the seed like, you know what, I'm going to prove you wrong. And it became this mission to enter every race I could. And as my book started getting more popular, it really just took off in terms of showing up for races. And I remember one race they had, would you mind getting me some water, please? I've forgotten.
Yeah.
We just got home from dinner, so we ate at an Indian restaurant. I think some of the spices.
Oh, yeah, right.
But I started just kind of being on this mission to prove that you could do it. And the other thing that kind of got me motivated was there were starting to be some books out by like Brendan Brazier and Rich Roll and Scott Jurek and, all these ultra guys and guys. And there wasn't this kind of middle of the road female version in running. Thank you, sweetheart. Excuse me.
That's okay.
So, my fourth book is Vegan Fitness for Mortals. And I just wanted
I love that title.
Get that out there and it's got all these training plans in there, not only for runners, but walkers, swimmers, and figuring out where you are. Because what ended up happening is the coach who said I should start racing asked if I would come help coach the kids with her. So for 3 years, before my first book came out, I was helping coach high school girls cross country and
wow, that's wonderful.
So much doing that. And what I saw was these kids would really burn out and sometimes end up with shin splints because they were doing too much too fast. And really the same thing happens with everybody, no matter what your age is. But I just felt like there needed to be some more gradual, people will ask, can I run a marathon in a month if I start training today? Well, if you haven't run a half marathon or a 5K in a while, you probably need to start out a little more slowly. So that was the idea behind that book, to just kind of do it more gradually.
Oh, that's great. Now I know I'm inspired to get it. I came across Vegan on $4 a Day quite a while ago, and the name just really appealed to me. I just stumbled across it. And I know you also co-authored Paleo Vegan. So you want to tell us about that? Paleo, it seemed like they're opposite ends of the spectrum.
Well, again, it was one of these in your face kind of moments where I started hearing people saying, oh, I'm going paleo and I'm losing so much weight.
Yeah.
So I forced myself to read some of the more popular paleo, meat-based paleo books. I'm going like, oh, This is Atkins all over again. This is the paleo, this is a South Beach diet. This is the zone diet. All these high protein diets, all the same philosophy and way of eating, just with a little bit of a marketing twist.
Right.
And sure enough, a year after the book came out, National Geographic came out with a cover story called The Real Paleo Diet. And in it, they quoted out of the book in about 10 different places, not by attribution, but they said the same things I did, which included that the world can't be sustainable on a diet based around meat and dairy. And they said the real truth about the caveman diet was that there wasn't a wild boar running through our backyard 3 times a day. Like, we could catch it successfully and eat it.
Got no place to refrigerate the meat either.
Yeah, not get sick and die. So, you know, and they also talked about, as I did, that the current hunter-gatherer tribes still in existence. There's only 2 in Africa. Their success rate is about once a month if they're lucky. So the reality is, said National Geographic, quoting from my book, we were way more gatherers than we were hunters. The tools that were used back then were very primitive, especially compared to how they are today in these 2 surviving tribes, and the success rate was really awful. So paleo vegan was my attempt to really define and give back to vegans the true meaning of that word. And you would have thought, you know, I had committed the worst sign. You know, one of the Amazon reviews was, how dare you use those 2 words in the same sentence, let alone in the book title. It's like, you know.
Well, too much protein is really bad for you.
Oh, yeah.
And Americans with their meat-heavy diet eat probably 2 or 3 times the amount of protein, plus, you know, animal protein we now know is very toxic. And
yeah, you know what's really fascinating, I just heard this story today with all the cold in Texas, that one of the worst problems they're having in hospitals is dialysis. They can't get water to do kidney dialysis. And why do they have dialysis in the first place? Because they're eating too much protein and their kidneys aren't functioning anymore. It's like, you know, when do we start connecting all these dots, you know?
Yeah.
Drives me nuts. Anyway.
Yeah, that's true. So here's what I think about paleo. You ready?
Yeah, go for it.
I say, why would you take advice from people who didn't live much past 25 or 30, knew nothing about nutrition, and basically grunted to communicate? Why are you taking advice from them? And those people back then, they were hunted also. They were probably somebody else's lunch or dinner more than the other way around. I mean, for a species that needs to eat a few times a day, it doesn't make sense to depend on food that runs away from you.
Right. And, you know, when I started researching paleo, there were all these back then, this was a while ago, all these online sites where you could order this caveman food and like ostrich eggs for $85 an egg. That blew my mind. You know, like, we're supposed to be doing that now. You know, where is this coming from? And the other thing that I'm really convinced about, those paleo books I told you that I read in the early days of paleo, I believe that they were funded by the meat and dairy industry, because these were, relatively speaking, books that were about the same price of my books, $15. You know, mine were paperback books, but these were shiny, slick, colorful, illustrated books with the hardbound, and you know, you just can't produce a book at that price. And you know, my first book, Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, because it was my first book, didn't have a single photo or picture in it, because my publisher wanted to make sure it was going to work and, you know, take off, which it did. And so all my other.
Are you going to write a new book based on inflation? Maybe vegan at $4.50 a day or $4.75?
We talked about doing a 10-year anniversary edition, but the prices just haven't really changed that much for beans and grains. I mean, it's about, and this is where I kind of stood out from other books that had been published up until that time, is the recipes in there. It was the first book to have estimated prices based on every single ingredient in a recipe.
Right.
I had been a financial consultant at Smith Barney at the time, and I just really wanted to kind of crunch those numbers and show people how ridiculously cheap it is. And so if it was a serving of beans, it would be, if you were buying in bulk at a big box store, it would be about $0.10 a serving for 4 ounces of cooked beans, and 20 cents a serving for 4 ounces of cooked grains, you know, like rice. So just using that as an example and making the argument, if you give up the meat and dairy, you've got plenty of money left over for produce, or you
Right.
can get the produce free or discounted if you volunteer at a CSA or a farmer's market.
Or even enjoying some of the vegan, there's some really great vegan meats out that aren't processed that really satisfy that meat craving. And there's things like I've added to my diet, like hemp seeds and walnuts, that they're a little more expensive, but overall, if you add up what that costs in a month to eat, it's still going to be a lot less expensive. And people don't realize that animal products are heavily subsidized by the government to the tune of billions. So it would cost us, a lot more, and then there's of course the environmental degradation that's costing us even more. So a lot of people, especially running, carbohydrate is essential. I know people, do you ever do carb loading the night before, or?
Well, everything I've read about that is vegans just do that normally and
Oh,
naturally.
right.
um,
Right.
but we're doing a 5K tomorrow morning, and we went to an Indian restaurant and had rice and beans, and it was wonderful.
Right.
So we're all ready to go. And again, it's really fascinating. I think that Rich Roll has written about this, other athletes, vegan athletes, how easy it is for vegans to recover, not only from races and running, but even falls. I did a thing last night. I had a Zoom call for 90 minutes, and
Wow.
I went to take some garbage out, and I was stomping on a cardboard box to put it in the recycle bin, and my foot got stuck underneath one of the flaps, and I lost my balance and fell on concrete. And it hurt so bad. I mean, I just expected I was going to be all bruised and, that kind of thing. And, this morning it's like, there's nothing. I mean, I didn't even lie on that side going to sleep last night. And this morning it's like, what happened? And, this has happened at races too. Sometimes, I remember once I tripped over a speed bump, and my knee was like gushing blood and stuff like that. And, people were like getting ready to try and run over to me, and I just got up, and I still got second in my group. And the bleeding just didn't go on very long.
Wow.
I mean, it was stopped by the time I got to the finish line. So there are all these kinds of anecdotal stories about how the recovery for vegans is we just don't experience things like our counterparts do. So,
that's mentioned in the
experience like
in the
that?
documentary The Game Changers too. They talk about how they found that when they went 100% plant-based, whole food plant-based, their recovery time. And that's a really important thing for athletes training, isn't it? Isn't that how you judge your fitness level? A good way to judge and a good recovery times?
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes consistency and continuing to build over time, and it doesn't take long to lose that. There's one study that I quoted in Vegan Fitness for Mortals about some college students. They did an experiment where they made them lie in a bed for 3 days, and in 2 days their muscles were seriously atrophying, and
Really?
trying to measure levels of fitness that way. And of course, my book Vegan Sex, much of what's in that book was documented in the Game Changers a year after that book came out. It's kind of interesting.
Wow.
Co-author Dr. Joel Kahn, who is a vegan cardiologist, talked about the study that the Game Changers talks about, the cycling study, where a number of cyclists just did so much better drinking beet juice before.
Oh, really?
And so every race we do now, we drink beet juice.
Just straight beet juice?
Yeah, there's a powdered product called Beet Elite, which I find to be.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was hoping.
Like that, but
are there any other tips and tricks like that you can give because even what's good for athletes is good for an average person like myself too, so athletes, because you're pushing your body further than the average person, you really know the things that work and things that don't much more quickly, I imagine. So what other tips? So you've got some beet juice powder. Where do you get it?
Any health food store,
'Cause
Amazon.
I hate beets, but I know they're so healthy.
Right. Well, you can also buy beet juice like at the health food store that's already made. And I did that for a while until I found the powder, and it's just so much more convenient. And I
Yeah,
think economical too.
right.
So that's, why we do that. But nitric oxide, which is what beets produce, fill the lungs with more, oxide, oxygen. So that's what you want when you're running, and, it works on a
Right.
cellular level. And,
Wow.
it's funny because you see it now being sold as a supplement, and it's like, if you eat the whole beet, it's probably just, but there's always some money to be
Yeah.
made.
Are there any other supplements that you take that you find help you for maintaining or?
Well, we do a multivitamin, and one of my health challenges when I was traveling on book tour, and I'll try and keep the story short, I was eating too many Cliff Bars and not nearly enough of the 9 servings of fruits and vegetables I should have been every day. And it was very stressful being on a plane all the time. And I found myself diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis, which, if you
Oh,
read about that, I thought my running career and my life was over because
hey.
it's an autoimmune disease, and I would be lucky to be walking in a year, let alone running. And what was happening is that my joints were getting very inflamed. My palms were cracked and bleeding. My fingernails were coming off, and I was fatigued. So my co-author, Dr. Khan, on Vegan Sex, put me in touch with Dr. Brooke Goldner, who had just written this amazing book called Goodbye Lupus. And she was supposed to be dead at 20, and instead she was alive at 40 with 2 kids. And she had started doing what she calls now in her 3 books, hyper nourishment. And what she told me to do, and what she writes in the book, is to grind a half cup of flax seeds every morning fresh, and then fill that high speed blender like a Vitamix to the top with greens. And then whatever you have left over, a frozen banana, plant milk, anything to get it down to blend. And once I started doing that, I believe I probably had an omega 3 deficiency.
Okay.
Once I started eating that many flax seeds, um,
How many flax seeds does she recommend?
for starters, a half cup, which is a
Is that ground or pre-ground? You measure
before it's ground. So the whole
that's a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
and within a couple, 2 to 3 weeks, my signs going
Wow.
away. It was incredible.
That is incredible.
So in terms of supplements, I do take a omega-3 DHA supplement still every day. And I also have, what else can we pile on here? So
I want to hear about your book about vegan sex, or should we ask Troy about that?
Oh, definitely ask Troy. Because he hasn't had any airtime at all here.
No,
so.
that's fine.
So is it true that vegans have better sex?
Oh, of course.
So how do you make that connection between vegan food and better sex? You can look at sex as could be considered an athletic sport for some.
It's all about
You do it right, I guess, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you heard what he just said. It's about blood flow.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. So when you have, you don't have inflammation in your body and your arteries are cleaner, right? And you have your endothelial cells are not whacking out from the toxic things that are in animal products like the saturated fats, animal protein. Dr. Campbell and his eminent study, or the China study, is really considered like one of the most rigorous scientific studies like ever done. And he says that animal proteins are the most toxic thing you can put in your body, very toxic.
Yeah, Dr. Esselstyn really was the first doctor to do the study on the heart and the endothelial lining, how it is clogged up by animal cholesterol.
Right.
And it can be reversed within a matter of, as the Game Changer shows, of pretty much minutes, but certainly days and weeks. And it's pretty amazing. So basically, you know what Troy was saying, what's good for the heart is good for other parts. And the reason is the reason that erectile dysfunction is a leading indicator of heart disease by as much as 30 years is because the vessels in the lower part of the body are much thinner by the time you have that death-defying heart attack 30 years later, which those are larger arteries, and it takes them longer to clog up and you know, give you a heart attack. So, you know, for me, I had a lifelong series of partners, marriages, starting at the age of 28. Again, every single partner had ED, and we were all told just part of the aging process. You know, it's stress related. It's just part of life. Get over it. Right. And so at the age of 62, I had, you know, before Troy, I had my first vegan experience, and it was so different. I thought, I've just got to write about this because I couldn't believe that it could be so different. I had been told by a physical therapist I had lower back pain, and they thought the reason was, and this just, again, kind of blew my mind, and I wrote about it in Vegan Sex, that it had been so long since I'd actually had sex, and to be graphic, intercourse, that my muscles had atrophied. So the prescription, and I kid you not, the physical therapist went to a sex toy store to buy, and she did this for all of her senior female patients,
Wow.
a dildo. And she said, it's not for the purpose of actually having sex, or it's to stimulate the muscles that have atrophied around the vagina. And I'm going like, what? Who knew this was a thing? And so several months into it, when it became apparent that I might actually have sex again, she said, oh, it's going to be painful. You're going to be dry like a prune. So be sure you take lubricants. And anyway, it was because of being vegan, you're eating foods that are very moisture rich and good for the body.
That's right.
And I didn't need the lubricants.
That's great. There's really no other book like that. I don't know if anyone would have the nerve to write it, actually, but I thought it was a fabulous book, and you know, it really is such a great. So you have 6 books out now, right? So I wanted to, before we move on, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned your website again, www.vegcoach.com. That's veg, VEGCOACH.com, and everything you want to know about Ellen is there. You can get her books. And I know I'm going to get a couple more of them too. And I love that one book you talked about. You actually have like a fitness plan. You help people. That's so important to have a plan rather than just go and like move things around. And so that's what's wonderful there.
Also, what's in that book too, there are a number of places that have QR codes. So you can actually go to my YouTube channel where I'm showing how to warm up before you run and cool down after you run, and then
that's fantastic.
Or exercises.
Well, I can't run. My knees have been bad for a long time, and I probably have been a lot worse if I hadn't gone vegan 6.5 years ago. But I like to walk. You know, that's why I was asking about walking, because I can walk really fast. You know.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You know, I just want to say I competed at the National Senior Games and got the gold medal this last time in the 4x100 meters, but they have speed walking as an event.
So they do. Yeah, I think because it's much, I know it's much easier on the body and the joints to be walking, but yeah, I love to walk. Walking is great.
And let me just say on that point, because you know we're visual here, and so I would not be a runner for 40 years if I didn't have good shoes. And here is the magic secret here. Oops, the popsicle stick is falling off. Orthotics. So,
right.
Orthotic. And so let's talk about this for a moment.
Okay.
Women, when we have children, especially, but even if we don't, our hips are wider. And when we give birth, there's a hormone called relaxin, which makes the hips get even wider. So we can just, in theory, pop that baby right out, which I did 3 times, natural childbirth, piece of cake. So when your hips expand, your knees collapse like this and your arches fall down. It's just sort of this chain reaction that goes all the way down. So the arch support, it raises the arch and it repositions the knee or the patella and, helps with the hips and the back. Yeah. So if I don't wear these, I mean, we're talking a day's time, I get runner's knee right on the inside of the knee.
Oh, wow.
These knock it out. So I joke that I put more podiatrist kids through college than I care to admit. I also have the reason I have popsicle sticks here is because I've had a chronic ankle. I fell through a trampoline in high school. And so I have a weak ankle and the popsicle sticks, the podiatrist kind of tweaks them around every once in a while just to relieve the pressure off the ankle. So, this is not, you were saying before we started, athletes are not born this way. We all have issues. And by the way, the other thing is running shoes. And before I wrote Vegan Fitness for Mortals, I worked at a running store so I could learn everything running and about shoes. And so it's really important to, if you do running, here, if you can see, I write the date on the shoe. That's right there.
How long do you keep a shoe then?
So in theory, this is what they say, 3 months or 300 miles, whichever comes first. And if you look at this shoe, you can see the foam here. And Nike really was the first to kind of do this good stuff with foam. But, I don't know if you can see that, how it's compressing there. And so these were dated, let's see, December, where are we? January, February. So
I noticed this shoe is flat on the bottom. It doesn't have an arch. Does that make a difference?
Well,
the shoe
it has a built-up arch in here. Right. It's a little hard to see that, but there are just these layers of foam that are really good. I mean, a lot of the shoe companies use this now, and you just have to experiment. One of the great things with being with another runner is he understands the shoes and the running shoes in the closets.
I had a shoe person tell me that even if you bought a pair of sneakers and just sit them in your closet for a year, they would still break down. Is that true?
I've heard that, but I will tell you that what also happens is that your favorite running shoe, after a number of years, goes extinct. So I have a couple more because they're always looking for a different kind of shoe and sort of planned obsolescence, which I hate. Why can't they just stick to the same shoe forever? So I have 2 more of these sitting in the closet when this one goes out.
Oh, that was smart.
I know they say that, but they don't get that compressed, those compression lines like you see on the shoe. Well, I'd rather do that than buy a shoe that's not comfortable.
Right. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss with us about being a vegan athlete and some of the challenges or myths that you've busted?
Certainly finding support, as Troy suggested. The cool thing that I really like/love things about Troy, and one of them is he's a self-taught vegan. He got to the party by himself. So many of us are like trying to spread the word and recruit others, and that's all good. And if it works, wonderful. But he had been a runner all this time as well. In fact, we figured out that when we met, we had been at some of the same races and didn't even know each other at the time.
Wow. So what made you go? How did you get up going vegan, Troy?
My son. I mean, I was trying to be an influence for him. I mean, I figured it'd be an easier way to pull him than push him. But an example. He's still not even close to that, but worked for me.
That's great. Was it health that inspired you, or animals, or the environment, or all of it?
Yeah. And then I've watched a lot of documentaries that what's the idea of what it's a bigger picture than just diet. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it.
Yeah. I mean, to change our diet that dramatically from what we're used to, there has to be some very compelling reasons. But like you made a good point, Alan, it really has to come from the person. And sometimes the harder we try to change people, the further away we push them, you know.
Right.
And the temptation is really there, you know, but the setting that example and just being that example is really ultimately going to help more people.
Right. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so again, I just wanted to mention Ellen's website, vegcoach.com. Is there any parting words that you have for us now?
Well, I know we're really in challenging times, and I have been watching this whole time. Wendy, are you on a treadmill? Oh, we can't hear her. Okay.
Wendy.
Unmute herself. Yes. Are you on a treadmill?
No, I'm on a bike using Zwift. It's a virtual, it's like Peloton.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I'm training for a half Ironman in June and then a full in September.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
Yeah, Wendy, how long have you been doing running or you run, don't you? You run too, don't you?
I run, bike, swim.
Run, bike, swim.
Well,
Yeah, you've been an athlete for a long time. Have you been pretty much your whole life an athlete also?
Well, I think my first 5K was in 2006. And then I've been doing it since then. And then I think the first triathlon was 2010, something like that.
That's
but I was vegetarian since 1988. Then in 2010, I went vegan, and it made a big difference in my athletic performance.
Wow.
Yeah. And the better I eat, the better I do. And she mentioned Brooke Goldner's smoothies, and I just had one today, but I forgot the flax. So I'll remember that next time.
Yeah, I'm gonna run out and get some of that beet powder, because that's I know beets are so healthy to eat, and a lot of, they say eat the rainbow, right? That a good way, just eat all the colors of the rainbow. What's your kitty's name?
This is Misty.
Hi, Misty.
So happy now.
Yeah, I have 4 cats here.
Ooh.
So what I'm going to do then is I will end the recording now, unless you have anything else you want to add. And I wanted to thank you so much for being here. It's beyond generous of you to just give us your time and your expertise and have a chance to chat with you. It's wonderful meeting you. And I'm so glad Wendy was able to join us too, because I know that she really appreciates having you here. And I will be putting this up on the website so people can see it.